It was a very good primary for the governor and his April agenda. On another level, it was not such a good primary for the governor and the GOP establishment. That said, the GOP did a land office business at the polls and the business of campaign finance and the judiciary. Arkansas Week next.
Arkansas Week is made possible in part by the Arkansas Times, keeping you informed by covering people, events, and politics in Arkansas. By FM 89, KUAR in Little Rock, with in-depth news reporting, analysis, and discussion each weekday.
This is Arkansas Week.
Hello again, everyone, and thanks for joining us for Arkansas Week. And what a week it was. Straight to it. Heather Yates joins us from the Political Science faculty at the University of Central Arkansas. Lance Turner, reporter, columnist for Arkansas Business. Michael Heblin, news director for Public Radio KUAR in Central Arkansas. Michael, not your ordinary primary in Arkansas.
Definitely not. A lot more people went to the polls, had a record turnout, I think probably in part because of Arkansas's primary being moved up to March and the state getting so many presidential visits. That made a big difference this time, and having it especially so competitive on the Republican side, getting the top three candidates making several visits to Arkansas, especially there in the final days, I think gave a lot more excitement to this and a lot more people. And Donald Trump, obviously, exciting a lot of people who traditionally haven't been moved by politics and spurring a lot of people to the polls either to support him or to vote for anyone but him.
Well, it's all politics is local, so let's keep it there for just a moment. It was, in terms of the primary, a very good primary for Governor Hutchinson. For
the most part, he saw the candidates who he had backed, who had supported the Medicaid expansion, all but one get reelected, not be knocked out in the primary. And that was telling for the governor. He did, though, endorse Marco Rubio, of course, and may have helped a little bit. Rubio, his polls doing a little better, but at the same time, that might be reflective of the national trends in general, as Rubio has emerged along with Ted Cruz as one of the top candidates. But overall, yes, good for Governor Hutchinson. And if any of these candidates, if say most of these candidates had been knocked out, that might have scared other members of the legislature. I think with this, it seems to suggest that candidates can be safe going along with the governor and the expansion, the continued expansion of Medicaid, and the changes he's proposing that will be taken up in a special session in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, in the near term, Lance, he needed a legislature more than he needed a president. April's his concern and not November.
That's right, yeah, and it'll be interesting to see kind of how it all plays out. I think the chances are still fairly positive that this time next year, well, I don't know. A year is a long time away, but right. But he needed X amount of these legislators to hang in there and win, so that he could make sure that his changes to the private option would go through. And Jana De La Rosa, who's one of these legislators who won, kind of had an interesting comment, and she said that she thought that this line of attack about the private option from the right, maybe there's nothing there anymore. Maybe that's not as useful. Maybe it's the resonance of that is starting to lose track among voters. I'd sort of thought that, if you had a big turnout for Donald Trump and for Ted Cruz, people who are so against Obamacare, that might translate into some of these local races as well. But it didn't happen. So it may be that she's right, that the resonance of that argument against Obamacare is just to the point now where we've litigated this for so long that the effectiveness may be gone from it.
Opponents, though, Heather, say they're not through. They're going to keep fighting.
Well, and this is the fascinating thing about looking at how Arkansas is playing out in this electoral cycle, because you have consistent strategies being executed at state and on the national theater, but with varied responses. So at the state level, it was absolutely important for Governor Hutchinson to keep the incumbents because of the legislative agenda heading into November. I think that was his primary concern there. And then on the national stage, wanting Arkansas to be a major player in the primary was a part of moving the primary up from May to March, to be a part of Super Tuesday, to also rally the Republican base. And by rallying the Republican base, it could have had a payoff for Hutchinson's endorsements of the state races in the legislature, which will translate into, well, he's feeling much more confident now, I think, heading into the legislative session, that he only had one casualty to this. And so it was very also clear in his strategies that they worked at the local level, not so much at the national level, because Hutchinson was not able to deliver Arkansas for Rubio. But at this point in time, that was, I think, the secondary concern. So it's fascinating to study how, or even to just review how these strategies executed very similar fashions have varied effects. So we saw a victory at the state level, not so much at the national level.
And Governor Hutchinson took real pride, I think, in the way this worked out for the legislative races, saying the day after the election day, speaking to the Political Animals Club in Little Rock, that essentially he put so much behind this, he really put himself at risk a little bit, but really took a chance in making a case for expanding, continuing the expansion, and said that, yeah, these candidates, this wouldn't have changed the makeup of the legislature in April, obviously, but just this would have sent the suggestion that you really can be vulnerable for your support of this, and said that this really kind of gives momentum to him heading into the session.
Well, and as Lance pointed out a second ago, Heather, and everyone, the right, the opponents of Arkansas Works, Private Arkansas Works, the Affordable Care Act, continue to say, we're not through, we're going to keep fighting. Yet is there also the hope on the part of the administration that the longer the private option, by whatever name, Arkansas Works, that the longer it is in place, now you got 250,000 Arkansans on, it becomes institutionalized. 3 generations, 4 generations ago, people railed against Social Security. Well, take it on now and see what happens.
Sure thing, sure thing. Well, and the opponents of the Arkansas Works is largely motivated out of the fact that it's federal funds coming out of the ACA are attached to Obamacare, and it's just that attachment, that economic attachment there, then gives momentum to the critics. But I think it's going to be a critical mass game when you have more and more people electing into this private option and benefiting from it, coupled with the electoral mandate that the governor now has. I think that's actually going to be a very strong united front to maybe quell the critiques a little bit, but they may not lose steam. They may continue on with just under the rubric of Obamacare, under the label Obamacare, and demonizing it that way. But I think really the odds are in favor of the current administration now, coupled with, like I said again, the electoral mandate, and then now it'll be at a critical mass game of the demonstrating that this policy is working. That will credit the current administration.
Not only that, but you can vote for it and survive.
There you go. Yeah.
But opponents of the private option, the Arkansas Works, they say that there aren't the votes in the Senate. Suggest there might not be in the House. We'll find out, obviously. That might not be the case, but I guess they're counting heads at this point and seem to feel, and this needs, obviously, 3/4 support to take the federal money. So that's still going to be a tough hurdle, but I think, as the governor said, he does have some momentum.
Well, in terms of legislative endorsements, Mr. Hutchinson went 7 for 8 on primary night. He is now, in terms of presidential endorsements, he's 0 for 2. First there was Mr. Huckabee, then there was Mr. Rubio, but I don't think anyone holds that against Mr. Hutchinson. You can see this coming 2-3 weeks away. Heather?
I think at the local level, the constituents who support the governor, he's very popular locally, and they also probably had their minds made up of who they were going to support in the presidential primary, and so they probably anticipated that he would offer his endorsement for Marco Rubio. But with that said, he also, I think he's going to get a lot of the support from the citizens. Going back to having this electoral mandate on Arkansas Works, is that Governor Hutchinson is also able to sidestep the legislature a little bit by indirectly, benefiting the constituents, and so the constituents then may tell their local senator that they're benefiting from this, and so that actually might help them out in the legislature. But in terms of the local endorsements versus the national endorsements, the popularity of the governor carried more weight, I think, with the local House and Senate, and not so much with the presidential race, obviously.
Well, and Mr. Hutchinson isn't alone among CEOs of states or senators. Everybody's endorsing anybody except Trump. Trump keeps winning.
And this was the case, too, that we saw in South Carolina, that Marco Rubio was not able to win with the governor, Nikki Haley's endorsement. And what's really interesting, too, is what's capturing attention is that Marco Rubio has at least 36 endorsements that have he's gained a lot of momentum with the endorsements for what we call the invisible primary, right? What's fascinating about the 2016 electoral cycle is that prior to this year, it has been the conventional wisdom that prominent party members endorsing a candidate translated oftentimes into success. We're not seeing that play out in 2016, because if we take a look at the numbers of endorsements Rubio had racked up, at least 36. Trump 7, but then the momentum is lining up behind Trump. And so here the conventional playbook is not translating under this rubric of the primary. So the invisible primary has not worked to Rubio's benefit. And so that is taking every party establishment in the states are taking a step back, saying, okay, we've got to reorganize and cut another tactic. And so what we're seeing is the Trump effect. The Trump effect, the popularity, and not even popularity as in the citizens like him, they know him, they may not necessarily like him, they turn out to the rallies to kind of see what this is all about. Exactly. They participate in the caucuses, and what is, I also think, a latent variable here is many states have gone to or readjusted their electoral rules to go to open primary. Right. So we're drawing in a lot of independent support as well, which is where this Trump effect might be making the most influence or most impact. So how that played out in Arkansas is that Arkansas also had an open primary. So we may be seeing a little bit of the Trump effect that is supplanting the conventional wisdom that endorsements from prominent party members that got behind Rubio did not translate into success. And so heading into the next primary cycle this month, March 5, March 8, March 15, we'll see how this strategy gets recalibrated.
Well, I mean, we can take a look at some poll numbers if you'd like. As of this morning, our neighbors in Louisiana are going to vote tomorrow. The latest surveys show Mr. Trump up by either 18 points or 20. Mississippi's around the corner. He's up 24. Michigan, a really big one, up somewhere between 10 and 20, but of course that's...
And he's up a lot in Florida, too, which is bad for Marco Rubio.
Leading Mr. Rubio in double digits.
It's the year of the outsider, and it's almost like if you have all these establishment Republicans endorsing you, that's almost a knock against you in some ways. And yesterday, this idea that Mitt Romney is going to come out and make this speech and everything's going to be okay, when Mitt Romney is sort of the poster boy of the Republican establishment, and it almost makes Trump support, it almost emboldens that constituency even more to go out and support Donald Trump. So I'm not sure what the idea was there, but it's an interesting year. It's the year of the outsider, and the party's going to have to do a lot more things, probably into the convention, if they want to stop Donald Trump.
Well, Heather alluded to this a second ago, but I have spoken now with several people who went to around Arkansas, went to their polling places, and said, "Who are these people? I've voted here for years, and who are these people?" Yeah. Mr. Trump is wont to say, "Look at all these new voters, Republican voters I've brought in." are they necessarily Republican voters? You got some, you know they've got some Democratic crossovers in there.
Absolutely.
And some people who haven't voted in years and are just plain angry.
Yeah, I think 71% of, I might be off on my figures, I think 71% of people who voted in this election had not voted, at least in the last 4 election cycles. And we had an Associated Press exit poll showed that overwhelmingly independents and moderate Republicans are liking Donald Trump, whereas on the Democratic side, Democrats are looking for an insider, someone who they're comfortable with and know what to expect, and that's part of why Arkansas didn't go for Bernie Sanders.
Interesting thing, and Heather, you alluded to this too also, some of the same exit polls showed that a notable percentage of Trump voters said, I'm not even sure I like the guy. 1. 2, I'm not even sure he'll make a good president. Right. 3, I'm voting for him anyway.
And to add to that list, they're not even sure he's electable in a general election.
Yeah.
That's also come up in discussion this week as well. The sentiment, the anti-incumbent sentiment, is the highest that it's been in a long time, and that's being translated into this anti-establishment. And not only anti-incumbent sentiment, but once upon a time, experience counted for something. And now we have candidates who have the experience who are trying to position themselves or frame themselves as anti-establishment with the experience, and it is not resonating with voters.
And I tend to think, too, that Republicans for a lot of years have counted on some interesting constituencies to get into office. Really wealthy business people and lower to middle income blue-collar workers. And they've created this constituency, and I think they've delivered for one part of that group and haven't delivered for the other part of that group. And I think that blue-collar end of the spectrum is saying, what have you done for me lately? The answer is nothing. Anybody but you. And I think Trump has been able to play on that. And so in that respect, I think the party has a lot of itself to blame for what's happening today.
But there is the fear among many that this will have a ripple effect in Republican races, that if you get so many people coming out to vote against Trump in November if he wins the nomination, then that could affect House races and Senate races. In Arkansas, Senator Bozeman is expected to face, I don't know if a tough challenge is the right word, but Democrats really believe they have a formidable candidate in Connor Eldridge and really want to make a big fight to pick up that seat. And if you have a lot of people coming out who are opposed to Trump, then that could play into that and impact.
And both Bozeman and
you've got some GOP incumbents who are in a lot more trouble and a lot more tenuous hold on their electorates than Mr. Bozeman has.
Right. Well, I was going to say both Bozeman and Hutchinson election night saying they would support the Republican nominee, whoever it was.
Right.
And I think maybe they know something we don't, but I think that's interesting as well when you talk about those kinds of races.
Well, it's interesting when you have so much of the establishment saying anybody but stop Trump. I mean, they're even talking about a third-party option or an independent option. It's a mixed message for.
Yeah, or a fight at the convention. You know, just the Republicans looking at any option, and it's fascinating to watch.
And not only looking at any option, but also trying to get the current candidates who are running to pledge support to unify behind whomever wins the nomination, banking on, trying to wage some bets here that it won't be Trump, but even if it is Trump, and the effect that it might have on congressional races, it would be time after the convention, then it's reframe the narrative so there is not the liability on congressional races, and that states, especially Arkansas, can keep the congressional delegation, and that there wouldn't be a backlash and then crossover that would benefit Democrats.
I suspect they'll keep it in Arkansas, but at any rate, no matter who is the nominee, but there is despite all of this action on energy, whatever you want to call it, chaos on the GOP side, some things seem to be trending toward the Democrats' favor, at least in terms of the president. Mr. Obama's approval ratings are inching up. Maybe not in Arkansas, but nationally, they're starting to inch up. Maybe the Supreme Court business is having a positive impact. 2 out of 3 Americans in the latest Gallup said, yeah, go ahead and appoint somebody and you ought to hear it. More to the point, lunch bucket issues, Lance. We got another good jobs report this morning.
That's right. Yeah, we did. That certainly helps. There's some good and bad in this report, but the top line number in that report is very good. 242,000 jobs added last month. The unemployment rate remaining at 4.9%. Consumer spending seems to be holding in place, which is always good because that's kind of the driver of our economy is consumer spending. The one weakness remains wage growth. That's been kind of the story of this last several years, is that wages have not grown to any great degree. We started to see some movement on that in the last report, I believe, but it seems to be kind of a bit of a one-time affair in terms of wage growth, and that remains stagnant. But yeah, from a national economic perspective, I think despite the swings in the stock market, I think everyone feels tentatively good about it. I think Warren Buffett even came out and said things were looking relatively okay. And although I think he found the recovery a little slower than he would have liked. Yeah, in terms of the jobless number, we're recovering.
Again, Arkansas. We got a revenue report for Feb. Bears watching. The state treasury bears watch. Always does, but.
That's right. Yeah, general revenue came in at $420 million. That's off only about $300,000 from the same time last year, and about $7 million shy of forecast. But still, some of the fundamentals of that, sales and use taxes were up, so spending again doing very well, and nothing in that report that the governor found would change his approach to how they're budgeting and then how they're going into the fiscal session. But they will certainly continue to keep an eye on it. So far for the year, the fiscal year, the state general revenue is up 2% and $32 million above forecast. So.
Okay, on to the Supreme Court. Got to get that in. We will have 2 new justices, including a chief, Michael, come January.
Yeah, Dan Kemp won a really contentious, or at least in terms of the advertising, dark money flowing into the state race against Courtney Goodson and an outside group who, we don't know where their money came from, just inundated Arkansas with money for advertising. I brought along a few of the mailers that I received. I mean, I got 3 of these in the span of 1 week. I'm used to getting maybe 1 right before an election, but I mean, almost comical to me the way you see a nice color, stately looking photo of Dan Kemp, and then you get the black and white Courtney Goodson looking kind of sinister. I mean, and not only mailers, but also poured a lot of money into television ads. And both of the candidates who were targeted by this group lost by pretty substantial numbers. Whether or not that's directly the result of the advertising is unclear, but Governor Hutchinson expressed concern about this and suggested maybe it's time we move to what most other states do, where the governor appoints someone and then that person is approved rather than having an election, because then you can minimize the effect that outside groups have like this.
Much appetite for that? Heather, you see?
Well, I see it gaining traction because of the outside money, and basically what makes administration, state legislators, and legislatures nervous is because dark money is big money, and we can't trace where it comes from. And so this race demonstrated the influence that big money, dark money can purchase, the access and the influence it can purchase. So I think the figures I saw was $1.6 million in the air war and somewhere around $336,000 expended in the ground war was some of the figures that I saw. And something else along with this, the effects of these mailers that come in is that the regulations on the information is very loose. They don't have to be factual.
No,
and so it's the absolute demonstration of impact of negative campaigning. All you have to do is introduce a little bit of doubt, and then that's the ball game. So I think that there will be an appetite for this for a couple of reasons. One, to kind of insulate the court from this type of, not so much influence, but this type of attack. And secondly, I think legislators too are thinking about their own campaigns, and if the courts or the candidates standing for the judiciary can be subjected to this kind of attack, it can absolutely happen to anybody else. And there was some outside money in some of the state Senate and state House races, not to this magnitude, but I think that's something that they're thinking about, and I think think that is what will fuel the appetite for considering restructuring how this is done.
Well, we may not know exactly or precisely who the donors of the dark money were, but you can get a fairly good idea of the philosophical pool from which it came. You had trial lawyers in every ad with horns and forked tails. I mean, it's a fairly good notion of where that came from.
Yeah, I mean, you know, some big business interests obviously making their themselves known in that race for sure. So it'll be interesting to see kind of what models they might kick around. There's been different models kicked around before. I think in previous sessions, relatively recently, there's been proposals to change how we do this, but the momentum is going to be there now more than likely.
Well, it'll be interesting, obviously, to see this court has become transparent because of all the controversies over the last 2 years, 18 months in particular. There's been an awful lot of leaking out of that court. The court has been on the front page in ways that the Supreme Court has never wanted to be on the front page.
That's true.
Now, come January, there will be a chief sitting across the table at conference with an associate justice who tried that he ran against. You know.
Yeah. Courtney Goodson obviously will still be on the bench as an associate justice, and she said in a statement that she accepts Dan Kemp's statements that he had nothing to do with these ads, and that she, looks forward to working with him. But you're right, the attention that the state Supreme Court has gotten, in particular about same-sex marriage, we eventually learned that the court had come to a consensus, an opinion on that, but didn't release an opinion, decided to sit on it and wait for the U.S. Supreme Court to rule. There are so many matters going before the state Supreme Court that it will be interesting to see how this plays out.
We'll continue to watch the chemistry. Thanks to everybody for coming and being a part of it. Thanks, as always, to you for watching. See you next week.
Arkansas Week is made possible in part by the Arkansas Times, keeping you informed by covering people, events, and politics in Arkansas. By FM 89, KUAR in Little Rock, with in-depth news reporting, analysis, and discussion each weekday.